So good day, everyone. Appreciate you joining us here for this chat. We're going to be talking about some work that GE Aviation has done around building out their own self-service data analytics foundation. My name is Kyle Hashi. I'm one of the senior solutions engineers here with TIBCO. And I'm joined today by John Tudor, Senior Director of Enterprise Products. John, I'll let you do a brief introduction of yourself.
Sounds good. Thanks everyone for having me today, and thanks, Kyle. As you said, my name is John Tudor. I'm a Senior Director for Enterprise Products at GE Aviation, currently leading the strategy and vision for enterprise data strategy, as well as building additional competencies with both engine software and data engineering. Been around the business now for about 10 years and have really done about everything but the kitchen sink in terms of data analytics over that time.
No, that's good to know. So John, what I'd like to understand is, can you give me a little bit of background of kind of, how GE began their journey of kind of building out, the self-service data analytics foundation?
Sure. So we were pretty early movers within the concept of a data lake and started really building out a data lake ecosystem almost 7 years ago. That ecosystem had a lot of early success looking at predictive and analytic models for our commercial space, specifically things like time on wing for jet engines as an example. If we fast forward a couple of years from that success, as with any company, if executives from other divisions see something like that happening and they want to be part of it, then we had requests to bring in really everyone to the data lake ecosystem. And after we brought all that data in, we came to the realization of, well, that's great, we brought it in, but what happens if 95% of the folks can't actually use the data? That coupled with the realization of, you really can't hire enough data engineers and data scientists really to meet the needs of an organization from a data perspective. We decided, why not kind of flip the script, if you will, and look at how do you empower an organization to become data analytics professionals while still leveraging their own subject matter expertise. And really based off that idea, 4 years ago, we kicked off our self-service data program and started looking at how we can evaluate various technologies to meet that need.
Okay, no, that's very good information. Now I know GE's been a long time TIBCO Spotfire customer. I started working with you guys back in probably around 2013 or so.
Mm-hmm.
So it is interesting to kind of see the growth over time as you guys have adopted Spotfire as well as other technologies into the environment. What were any of the big challenges you faced early on around the architecture, adoption, executive buy-in, any other areas? Any earlier successes that help push adoption forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a couple, I guess, from the earlier, we'll say, outcome standpoint, one of the earliest outcomes we ever did drive was the ability to really understand, how were particulates, impacting what's called the shroud of an engine, and to understand how that impacts, when an engine is to come to a shop for a visit. So by correlating weather and really time series engine data, we were able to determine when an engine should come into a shop or not, as relates to that deterioration of the shroud. What's really cool about that is, it was the first time in history that company had really overturned kind of a U.S. governmental ruling around that from the Federal Aviation Administration. So that was a very cool thing that helped us kick off our data lake. Then as we kind of proceeded forward to self-service, we had many early use cases, but one that's really stuck in my mind is we were actually able to visualize within the span of a couple of days, where all of our planes and really engines were taken off around the world across all of our customers, and able to do that in one simple infographic. And previously, it had taken us almost 4 months to build the same thing. And that was really one of the earliest use cases that we saw success in. There's obviously been many more since, but there was some of our early successes. In terms of challenges, a couple key ones that have kind of come along. One, while we haven't talked about too much here, data stewardship with data catalogs is always a tough one. It's a great concept in theory, but it's hard to get folks to gravitate towards being data stewards. It's kind of like saying, hey, you have a full-time job, but try picking up this additional responsibility, and with the hope that you won't be bothered as much to provide, we'll say, context to users in the future. That isn't always successful, and we've done a lot of work around gamification initiatives and ways to really make that a more engaging and fun process that have really driven that in the organization. A couple other challenges we met along the way included how do you actually track the ROI of a program like this? So we have roughly 6,000 projects in our business that have been built out of our self-service technologies. And sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out, well, what is everybody doing? What's the ROI on that? And we had to get really creative in different ways to capture and show that value. And then additionally, I'd say just in general, the idea of governance on the ecosystem, you want to empower people as much as possible, but at the same time, you want to ensure that you're kind of protecting them from themselves and protecting others as well. That's always an interesting part of this role is how do you balance all those different factors. Those would be some of the challenges as well as the early wins that we had early in the program.
Okay, you mentioned ROI in there. I mean, do you have any numbers that you can share around kind of what ROI you've seen, big improvements? How's it kind of altered your guys' approaches to other projects?
Sure. So there's a few different key metrics we track. First one is really the standard definition of ROI. So when you think about, really how much money am I putting this and how much am I getting out? Generally speaking, that's what finance wants to see, right? They want to know if it impacted the income statement or balance sheet. That's not necessarily a metric everyone cares about, but they do. And the way we ended up figuring out how to capture that was by looking at how do we capture the sentiments from really the top projects in the business and then correlate value to that. So we call it what we call our self-service data all-star program, where folks across the business can nominate themselves or others for basically quarterly awards for their self-service outcomes. And even though maybe 1 or 2% of projects get nominated, and maybe even only half of those get a dollar value assigned to them, we're able to kind of roll that up. So I can't speak exactly to all the numbers involved, but we can pretty easily prove, at least 50x, if not more so, ROI usually in our cases for what we spend. So a lot of great value that comes out of that. Additionally, a couple other key metrics that we look at that I personally care about a lot. One, what's the number of active users within the last, we'll say, 3-month time period? Right. To me, value is happening when folks actually take action. And that means they're actually actively using the tools. Giving someone a license and not doing anything with it isn't really helpful, right? So I look at what's the active percentage of users. That's a big driver. And then the third one that took us a while to learn, but ended up driving a lot of value is looking at how many of these projects become what we call a DT product. And the model we built around that we call POC, pilot and product. Basically a POC being something someone's built that's not automated. Pilot is something automated and being used in the business. And then product is something that now our IT organization has taken and prioritized and put funding behind. And what's interesting about that model is, out of those, say, 6,000 projects, we track how many people either use the Spotfire visualization or Dataiku output, whatever the object is that comes out of the process. And we say, okay, if there's over 50 users a month that are uniquely using this, is this something now that becomes a product that we care about? And what we do is we'll take those outputs, pass them to the respective CIO of that division and say, hey, how do you want to handle this? Is this part of your new innovation pipeline? Does it go into another product? And that metric's been pretty powerful. We've had about 700 or so projects that have become product level throughout that process. And that's something that really, at the highest CIO level they care about because it turns self-service into an innovation pipeline. There's no better way to capture what your business really needs than to see them spend their own time on it and build it, and through their actions tell you what the priority is. So those are some of the key metrics and value props and really ROI that we've tracked as it relates to the program.
That concept of turning things into that innovation pipe, that's actually very cool on there. I've also seen you discuss this concept before of ambassadors and the Digital League as part of that self-service data foundation. Can you provide a little bit more detail, kind of how that started and how that's kind of impacted?
Yeah, absolutely. It comes down to the fundamentals or even the philosophical approach to the program. So when we kicked off self-service, one of the more unique things we did is we actually use a design thinking approach. And what I mean by that is what you learn from watching someone interact with something versus asking them how they interact with it are two different things normally, right? That kind of surprises people.
Yes.
That's really how it happens, right? And when we started this program and we evaluated some other technologies that were eventually partnered with, we'll say TIBCO, Spotfire, those being Dataiku as well as Alation. What we did in order to get that process started is we actually had roughly 40 or so users from across our business pilot 5 or so different technologies in real time for about a month and a half. And we directly supported them while they worked on those. So they got a half-day training each tool, went and tried to solve their use cases. And following that month and a half period, we came back together and basically all selected what technologies to go forward with. So it wasn't me in the IT department saying, thou shalt go do something, which experience has told me is not very effective in working with business partners. But instead, them coming back and saying, you want to move forward here. And that group of 40 represented about 6 of our different divisions. And at that time, that's how we selected Alation and Dataiku through unanimous decision. Now, what's interesting is those 40 or so folks became so interested in what we did, they became what we end up calling ambassadors. They went back to the business, they presented their use cases to their leadership, built their projects, and ultimately they helped us grow from that initial set of 40 to over 2,000 active users in our program. And they really did that by being almost dotted line extensions of our team, right? They would help train locally on site. They will go out and maybe help us enforce governance standards, provide consolidated feedback to us. So they've really become our partners across the business to do this work, which I've always found to be a really interesting concept in how we continue to grow the program, right? It's really a partnership between business and IT in this case. And then we talk about the Digital League. So interestingly, when we started our self-service program, really near the same time, almost a little chicken and egg here, our CEO of the time, David Joyce, made a really big buy-in into data analytics driving our business. And part of his way of doing that was to create what he called a Digital League, which is where you bring together folks from all different disciplines, think finance, supply chain, aerospace engineering, IT, all functions, co-locate those folks, and then have them work on specific outcomes driven by data analytics. So our Digital League initially was 7 young engineers in our business, and over a period of a couple of years grew to almost 150 people who all got co-located to work on things like on-time delivery, cash, how do we really impact factors in our business? And those same folks became folks who use self-service extensively to build those outcomes. And again, really driving a lot of business value. While today we no longer have the Digital League, we actually moved to a point of we didn't need necessarily to have a specific team to do that. Instead, it became part of the culture of our business and really spread more widely as self-service has. So again, it just kind of speaks to the importance of really making data a focus in your business, but also that partnership and working directly with your business teams to help drive those outcomes and improve.
No, that's actually very interesting. It was interesting to hear about that growth. You said you started with what, 7 data engineers? And then was it 2 years up to about 150?
Not data engineers. Actually, those were 7 aerospace engineers.
Oh, 7, sorry,
completely
aerospace
business
engineers.
and people who were just pulled together to drive business outcomes, not really being maybe 5 or 10% in IT background, almost all being from the business, but using these technologies and partnering with IT to drive those outcomes.
Okay. So, I mean, it sounds like you guys have done a really nice job of kind of really operationalizing this whole self-service data aspect, and basically people being able to go out there and make their own decisions and drive those into actual operational changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I tell people it's a lot like running your own startup or small business in a large organization, right? So I'm not necessarily driving a huge team to do this. It's actually a relatively small team, but by making sure we do things in the right automated ways, by operationalizing, as I like to tell my team, creating the funnel correctly. If we build up these guide rails and make it easier for people to do the right thing and to do it in the easiest way possible for them to drive their outcomes, all of a sudden you kind of get this force multiplier of direction. So we spend a lot of time on automating things as simple as allocating licenses, how you take projects to production. We built test-driven deployment mechanisms that actually look at, they check someone's code and everything matches correctly, then it goes straight to production in one click. We do a lot of work around those things in order to really drive a way to kind of force multiply from a smaller team to a much larger organization. And again, kind of using an ambassador network to also help do that. So that's something the team focuses a lot of time on, right? It's not just the tools or technology, it's actually the operational and technical and people processes you put around it. And then just making sure your teams feel like they have support. We even got to the point where we had a global training program, trained nearly 3,000 people at the time across 12 different countries in the world, and really brought them all into this same kind of skill set. But at the same time, we've got hundreds of pages of Confluence or Wiki documentation to support them, training videos, a whole central team that helps them now. At the end of the day, it just comes down to how do you continue to scale and operationalize so you can really take what you have to the next level.
Okay, oh, interesting. I guess one of the things is where you kind of see things going next for GE in the self-service data space. What's kind of on that future roadmap?
Sure. So there's a couple key areas. One you kind of already heard me touch on, is data governance. So historically, we have not had much of a data governance function or organization. Even my own personal role expanded to really start a data governance team a couple of years ago, and that was intentional. Because when you look at data governance and self-service, they're almost two sides of the same coin, right? How do you enable people, but at the same time protect them? It's kind of like I go jokingly tell folks, my job is kind of like someone who runs a playground, right? You have to enable people to have as much fun as possible, do what they need to do, but at the same time, keep them from hurting themselves or others. And it really speaks to that dichotomy. So we spend a whole lot of time now, and we continue to look at how do we build data governance? How do you create a useful data catalog? How do you drive automatic column level lineage? How do you do attribute-based access control? How do you instantiate a culture of data stewardship and ownership and really drive that ownership of data as an asset in the business? Those are things we spend a lot of time on that really help grow self-service, because the last thing you want is governance to be a blocker. You want it to be an enabler. So there's a lot of time spent on driving that enablement angle and really helping people get to what they need faster and better understand it from a data perspective. Additionally, another area that I see self-service moving in for us, we've moved really hard into data science over the last couple of years. Previously, our focus was very much on business, what we call business analysts in the industry, right? And over that time period, we've now moved to being the, we'll say, sole analytic convention platform as well for our business. So our whole data science community now, roughly 130, uses Dataiku to build new analytics models for our business and then takes them to the next level to productionize them. That's been a big push for us in terms of changing how we operate and really scaling to that next level. And then very new and hot off the press, we're also looking at robotic process automation in our business and how do we take that forward. We're to really start automating maybe manual processes that our teams are doing. So there's a lot of evolution there. And then very candidly, this year, we're very focused on getting to cloud. So about 90% of what my team focuses on right now is how do we move to a cloud-based ecosystem, and especially look at how do you separate storage and compute and really drive containerization to really drive efficiency in the ecosystem. So there's some of the big ideas I think we're looking at today.
Okay, well, that's good to know. When you brought up cloud there a moment ago, what do you guys kind of see the main driving factors to get you to the cloud in that sense?
Sure. So there's a couple. One already kind of hit on it, and from a, I guess, a technical architect standpoint, which is where I started this journey. I know I'm a senior director now, but started as an architect on this program. The biggest Achilles heel of a data lake is that storage and computer in the same layer, right? So what happens is as we'll say data objects or projects get developed, all of a sudden there's contention for the resources in the ecosystem. A great example might be we have some great new self-service development. Someone decides to run 700 million rows of data through their Python code, and all of a sudden you break something in the data lake. All in this operational process just went down. That now means we can't ship an engine out the door. That has happened for us. And that happens because you're conflating your production processes that came out of self-service with your new innovation processes, right? It's the maturity of a data lake has grown to the point of it's now becoming critical how your business operates. So when you move to a cloud-based environment, what you're able to do is separate that storage and compute. So you can have a, we'll say, a similar layer of enterprise trusted data, but have that data be available in multiple column zones for consumption, but also separate the processing of that data for specific containers execution using cloud storage at that time or infrastructure. Think of things like EKS with Elastic Kubernetes Service is a good example. So by doing that, you now move away from that contention and you're able to support those multitude of use cases, whether that's large analytical processes for production, self-service innovation, operational needs, real-time needs, but again, using a similar backbone of data so your business is speaking the same language. To me, that's really where the value prop for cloud comes from. I mean, you can always talk about cost and other elements. I personally don't see that as being as tangible, but I do think being able to separate that and scale compute quickly up and down as you need to is really the key outcome there.
Well, it's something basically being able to adjust the growth as you need it when you need it.
Mm-hmm. Grow as you need it when you need it, and also have dedicated ways to run the workloads you need, right? If you want to be operationally sound, you don't want to put critical workloads in somewhere people are experimenting, generally speaking.
Keep people in their own sandboxes as needed. I guess from that perspective there, where do you see kind of that cloud journey? And where do you guys kind of think of where are you at with that right now? I mean, is this something that you see, kind of transitioning to over the next year, 2 years, 3 years? Do you think you're most of the way there? Just kind of, how do you see that path going forward?
From my perspective, I think by the end of this year. So we're completely mid-flight. That's where I spend a lot of my time doing a large program and making that migration happen now. So from our perspective, that should be done by the end of this year. We have business needs to do that as well as operational support needs. And it's really the next big push for our team. So it's almost like taking this ecosystem that's been built over almost 7+ years and trying to make sure you all migrate in the best way possible to a new environment across really thousands of people. I mean, our consumers from our data lake environment are over 18,000. Even Spotfire specifically is over 15. So when you think about that, that's a lot of coordination.
Yes.
But the goal is by the end of this year, we're continuing to make that effort happen. And really, there's a lot of components, even governance and compliance, that wrap into that as well, which has had some interesting challenges. But the teams continue to grow and kind of execute on that. So, yeah, a lot of effort, but I think by the end of this year.
Okay. Yeah, I've worked with some of the folks on the Spotfire team there, and I know that they run into some challenges getting everything moved over there in a timely manner. I mean, I think I really enjoy the opportunity to chat with you here today, John, and you share all this information with what GE's kind of done on this, this journey that you've been on. I don't know, are there any kind of closing comments or anything that you'd want to add on?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would add is now I've been lucky enough that I was able to get into this space and really grow something that's been really passionate for me, right? I absolutely love this topic and what I've done with it. It's been very invigorating. And I'm also lucky enough that a lot of folks who are companies trying to do this also reach out to me. A lot of good benchmarking, even sessions like these. And the only thing I would say is, it's a lot of this comes down to philosophy and the why behind why you're doing it and how you partner on it. We're technologists. We talk about technology and architecture a lot, right? We're all passionate about that. But I truly believe, we'll say the secret sauce of why this program has worked is because of the intense partnership with the business, because of the focus on value and outcome and grassroots, and really trying to find a way to drive a philosophy of you believe people will do what's right and best if you give them the opportunity to, and you give them the right tools. That's been a challenge culturally, right? That can be a challenge when you're an organization that's maybe not comfortable democratizing things in that way, opening things up. You're used to a lot of control from a CIO or leadership perspective. This is a different methodology. And that mental model can take some work to get to. But to me, I believe it really drives a whole change in how your culture operates and really what you can do as a business, and also just really helps grow people in general. So I guess I would just leave it with that and encourage folks to not be afraid of having those conversations and those steps, because I think it's important to really drive in a thought process like this forward.
No, that's actually really good advice. I mean, you really do need integration, interaction, those cross-functional teams between the business, IT, technologists, subject matter experts, et cetera, on there. Now, John, I appreciate you sharing your time with us, everyone, today. And I wish you the best going forward.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kyle. Thank you to you and the team for having me, and looking forward to continuing to work with you. Thanks so much.
Okay. You've been a great partner so far, TIBCO and GE. So.